But a recession is actually good for some people. If you're someone like me with an almost secure job, what happens is that during a recession, interest rates go down, and if interest rates go down, mortgage payments are going down, so I'm going to be better off if I had a mortgage. During a recession, inflation rates come down typically. So again, people who have an income which is going up with time find that in real terms, their income is buying more goods and services as well. Firms, of course, I mentioned early on, might be able to persuade workers to work harder and persuade workers not to ask for higher wages. So some firms who can stay in business are probably going to be happier during a recession because they can manage to keep wages low, as long as they're in the right areas where they can still sell the goods that they want, that they're producing. To summarize, to conclude my talk, I mentioned to start with that the recession has just begun, and some people think they see green shoots and we're out of the woods, or what other analogy they have. But I think we have a long way to go, and the previous history of previous recession says that when unemployment, it will go up, and then it'll take a long time before it'll come down. Unemployment has already started increasing, and measures of the underutilization of labour say that the unemployment rate is now 13.4% in the last month, even though the official unemployment rate is only 5.7%. The data which came out last couple of weeks ago said that private investment had fallen a huge amount in the last quarter, which means, of course, that in the future, gross domestic product will go down, and that means the recession is still a long way to go. I mentioned that unemployment has significant social costs, and these are important, and there are very high economic costs because you are not using all your labour services efficiently. What should we do? And I'm not going to say very much about it, and I think the government is doing the right thing in terms of cutting taxes, increasing government expenditure on infrastructure, etc. I think that's the right thing to do, but they should also be introducing many more labour market programs which are targeted to finding work for especially the long-term unemployed. And in the previous government, in the previous Labor government, they'd introduced a so-called job guarantee scheme, which they said that any unemployed person who's unemployed for more than 18 months would be given a job either in the private sector or in the public sector. 18 months is too long. If we want to have a job guarantee scheme, we should try and introduce it with perhaps people who have been unemployed for 6 months or more. These are difficult times, and I think we need to try and spend a lot more time on trying to improve the labour market by government policies of labour market programs and trying to stimulate the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raja. It sets the night up very well, your analysis. We're very lucky tonight to have with us Clare Martin. Clare, some of you perhaps from school might know that, but Clare is to adult Australians a distinguished, a well-known and a very popular Australian leader. We're very privileged to have her with us here this evening. And thanks very much, Clare, for taking the time to be with us. Clare is a Sydney-sider, raised here and a graduate of the University of Sydney. After that, she became a journalist, working as a broadcaster with the ABC for 17 years and worked in Sydney, in Canberra and in Darwin. In Darwin, and this is probably what brought her to the attention of most Australians, she became the Labor member for the Darwin electorate of Fanny Bay, a post she held for 13 years. When Labor came to power, she became the Chief Minister, the equivalent of a Premier in the other states, in that Labor government. As if that isn't enough public career, then Clare since then has become the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Council of Social Service. So all of those non-government organisations and welfare organisations around Australia, their peak organisation is, as we call it, ACOS, or the Australian Council of Social Services. And it's seen as the national voice of low-income and disadvantaged people. So please welcome to the microphone Clare Martin.
You won't be surprised to know that I'm going to speak very much in the same language as Raja, but do it in a slightly different way. So many of the things he's talked about, I will be talking about as well, but hopefully adding another perspective to those. I just thought I'd start because, you know, economic realignments, talk of recessions are pretty depressing. So I thought I'd just give you an idea of the fact that by nature I'm an optimist. Maybe you'd say being a politician you always should be an optimist, a former politician, but I am an optimist. But that optimism is being severely challenged by what's happened in our economy over the last 9 months, and certainly what's predicted to happen over the next 18 months to 2 years. I mean, to such an extent am I an optimist that every day when I get up, I scour all the newspapers, I look at the national economic data that's being released, and I devour all the media commentaries, and I try and find out what's going on and try and look for things, of course I'm an optimist, about where there might be the occasional ray of economic sunlight. But I must say it's difficult. We all know, and Raja referred to this, that Australia is a lot better off than many of those we compare ourselves in the OECD. We know that our economic fundamentals were in better shape than many other countries when this global financial crisis started last year. And that compared with many of those other countries, loss of jobs for Australians hasn't yet been so dramatic, and that the federal government moved very quickly and I think very boldly to stimulate our economy. I mean, there was the cash stimulus payments, there was the billions of dollars going into the housing market broadly for first homeowners and for affordable housing, and that's almost the sum of $8 billion going there. Thousands of dollars going into schools right around the country, well, billions of dollars going into schools, and schools are getting, it seems whether they want them or not, new gyms and new libraries. There's $4 billion going into insulation and solar hot water heaters being installed in homes right around the country, creating jobs through that. And that community jobs are being funded with the Community Job Fund, and also climate change projects, again, hundreds of millions of dollars going in there. So a big stimulus going into our economy to create jobs, to sustain existing jobs. But I find myself wading through the gloom of much of the economic data, looking for signs of a turnaround. And I got really pleased this morning when I woke up and census data, which census surveys the business community. And the business community has, you know, been feeling very strongly the signs of the recession. And this morning, for a bit of a turnaround, which made me almost leap out of bed, was that the business community was saying they felt better. They felt more optimistic than they had for a number of months about the future. And I find myself, you know, that was a good sign for today, and I find myself looking for figures about the retail sector and whether they've had a good, you know, a good quarter, for example, or whether maybe the balance of trade goes unexpectedly in Australia's favour, or maybe, you know, the share market has a good day, a good couple of days, and you think this could be the ray of economic sunlight we're looking for.